Thank you so much for joining us for today's launch of the Nuclear Energy Agency's report on improving gender balance in the nuclear sector. It is now my pleasure to introduce the Director General of the Nuclear Energy Agency, William D. Magwood IV, for opening remarks. Mr. Magwood, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and welcome to all of you. It's a great pleasure to open today's discussion about the report that we are rolling out today, which is called Gender Balance in the Nuclear Sector. We have been talking about gender balance in the nuclear sector for many, many years. It seems to me that I can think back even 20 years when people were agonizing about the lack of women in the nuclear sector, particularly at leadership levels. And I'm sure it was even discussions before that. And around the international community and in national forums, there have been many discussions and forums and meetings and conferences about the subject. And it is unfortunate to report that very little has changed in most countries and that progress has not really been realized nearly to the degree that's necessary. What we at the NEA have been doing over the last 3 years is working on this issue with a different perspective. Our steering committee on nuclear energy chartered the task force, which is chaired by Dr. Fiona Raymont, who will be speaking in a few minutes. This task force was brought together with the idea that it's time to stop simply talking about the issue and time to take action on the issue. And you're going to learn what this task force has accomplished over the last 3 years through the report and the presentations you'll hear today. This report that we are unleashing today, which is already available on the website, represents years of work to gather the first publicly available information on an international basis on women in the nuclear sector. The surveys and analysis that have gone into this have provided us a very strong data foundation for a policy formulation. The policy formulations that are reflected in this report lay out a framework for countries to truly transform the long-running gender disparities in their sectors. The nuclear sector presents a unique and important opportunity to make corrections in gender imbalance. And as we see around the world, women are still vastly underrepresented in STEM areas, particularly in nuclear. The nuclear sector, however, is different from other sectors. And as we'll hear in the report, we believe that the nuclear sector provides an opportunity to take real action, perhaps for the first time on a global basis, to make corrections in this area. If the policy recommendations are adopted, we believe that they will lay the groundwork for really unlocking the full potential of women contributing to the nuclear energy sector. And this comes at a very, very important time. Around the world, interest in the nuclear sector is higher than I've seen it in many, many years. Countries that have in the past decided to not pursue nuclear in the future have reversed course. They're now considering new nuclear facilities. Countries that never built nuclear plants before are now, for the first time, seriously considering new technologies in the nuclear area. Emerging economies in Africa, the Middle East, Southeast Asia are for the first time also beginning to put the infrastructure together to build new nuclear power plants. This is happening for a variety of reasons. Energy security, of course, is a big part of it, but also the greater desire on the policy level to deal with the climate crisis. If nuclear is going to play a strong role, it does have to deal with this gender bias. We believe that for the talent that's necessary to go into the sector, to supply the skilled workers necessary to build, design, operate new nuclear facilities, that countries around the world are going to need to have women play a much, much stronger role. As you'll hear in the analysis, we found that around our member countries, about 20% of the workforce in STEM in the nuclear sector is female, which is an embarrassingly low number. And it's also an average, which reflects the fact that in many countries, the number is far, far lower. As you'll hear from the presentation coming up in a few minutes, We have looked at this data and we have come up with a variety of policy alternatives that countries can take to really address this problem. Not just talk about the problem, but really address it for the first time. As Dr. Raymond will speak later, she has led this group along with a wide range of experts and officials from our member countries. You'll hear from her, you'll hear from Alicia Duncan, who was the chair of the data collection task force. You'll hear from other members of this group. I'm very proud that the NEA was in a position to foster this group's work and to encourage its progress and to reach this day on International Women's Day, where we can launch this report and hopefully provide people around the world with a good view as to what the nuclear sector's current status is and what is possible for us to do in the future. For those who are working in the nuclear sector, I hope this report gives you a sense of what's happening around the world. Maybe in your home organizations, you have a good sense of what the current state is, but now you'll have a better view of the global situation. I hope decision makers will see that this data provides a strong basis for action to be taken and for us to move past the chatter and to move into action. And most particularly for young women who are considering the future. The nuclear sector is an exciting place to be. And I believe it's going to be the place to be if we're going to really solve the world's energy environment challenges. Dr. Raymond and I are actually in Birmingham, UK, working with about 24 young ladies who are close to entering university and thinking about their futures. We've had a very interesting discussion with them. They have a lot of concerns, a lot of fears. But one thing that we found that was very encouraging is that they're all thinking openly about their futures. And they think that being scientists and engineers, for some of them, is the way they like to go. And they were willing to make the hard work necessary to take that path. And for some of them, I expect that they will end up in the nuclear sector to help us solve the problems that exist and enable us to have a cleaner, brighter future. So again, thank you for joining us. I hope you enjoy the presentations you'll hear today. And I think you will find that this work that has been completed by this task force is very unlike what has come before and really points a very clear path to a better future for women around the sector. So with that, let me ask Florence Marr to take the floor and to give you a presentation and an overview of what's in this report. Florence, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Magwood, for that kind introduction. It is a real pleasure to be here today. I see that we have several hundred people on the call. I'm very excited to share with you the results of our multi-year data and policy endeavor. It has been a real pleasure as a social scientist at the NEA to work with the women and men of the Gender Balance Task Group to put together this report, which entailed collecting data for the very first time about the state of gender balance internationally in NEA member countries. I want to encourage you to download the report, since my presentation will be very brief and can only cover a few highlights. So I'd encourage you to go onto our website and download the report. It is available as of this morning. We started this task with a task group. The international community loves task groups. And seeing that after many years and decades of little progress on the gender balance issue, it was decided to form a group of NEA member countries led by Dr. Fiona Raymond, who is the vice chair of the Nuclear Energy Agency's steering committee, to put together a group to tackle this issue head on. And when the group met for the first time before the pandemic, they realized that there was insufficient data to understand the problem. Without data, how can we know what the situation is and how we can tackle it? So the group set out to do a survey, 2 surveys, in fact, a human resources survey and a public opinion survey. And the results of those 2 surveys are what we have in the report that we're launching today. The human resources survey, we gathered data from 96 nuclear organizations in 17 NEA member countries. And we gathered very detailed, granular data about the number of women in those organizations, but not just the number, but where they were. Were they in STEM roles or in non-STEM roles? Were they in management positions, and what level of management? Lower management, middle management, upper management, the top executives, or non-management positions? What were the percentages of new hires? What were the attrition rates? How about participation in career development programs? What about promotion rates? And what about salaries? So this is very granular data that had never been captured before on the international level. That was the Human Resources Survey, a very ambitious endeavor. But we didn't stop there, because you may use that human resources data to understand the situation, but how do you understand what are the barriers that are causing that, and what might be some of the potential solutions? So to complement that human resources data, we also launched a public opinion survey of women working in the nuclear sector. We surveyed over 8,000 women in 32 NEA member countries, and we asked them about their work conditions, the culture of their workplace, their experiences, what they thought were the barriers, what was the impact of pregnancy, maternity leave, caregiving, family responsibilities, what did they think about their management's commitment to gender balance? What were the gender impacts that were maybe impacting them? Did they feel that they were being treated, or that maybe the treatment was equal, but the impact might have been unequal based on their gender? And what might be some of the possible solutions? So with these 2 data sets, we have put those together to generate some findings, and importantly, also some recommendations. So this report has 3 main objectives. First, to take stock of the current gender balance in the nuclear sector in NEA countries, which had not been done before. To provide the first public international data. Again, there has not been good data available on the international level about this issue in the nuclear sector. And finally, to establish a policy framework with recommendations of how best to move forward. The report is over 100 pages long, including the appendices. So again, I encourage you to download it. The link is here. The first chapter provides a summary overview and our policy recommendations. The second chapter dives more deeply into the data from the Human Resources Survey. And the third chapter dives more deeply into the qualitative data from the public survey. So again, if you do nothing else today, please download the report. What we found is that women are a quarter of the nuclear sector in NEA countries. It varied by country, but even in the countries where women were perhaps overrepresented, these were extremely small sample sizes. So overall, in the nuclear sector in NEA member countries, they are underrepresented significantly. And they are even further underrepresented in STEM roles. So if women make up a quarter of the nuclear sector, they are only a fifth in STEM roles. And they are also less likely to be promoted from STEM roles than from non-STEM roles. So where women are advancing, it's not in STEM, it's in non-STEM. Kudos to those ladies in non-STEM roles who are succeeding. This is wonderful. But we also know our sector does have a preference for STEM. So it could be difficult to change that upper leadership if women are not being promoted from those STEM roles. And we did find that, in fact, that upper leadership could use some gender balance since it is less than 1/5 female. Finally, we also found that women on the whole are paid less than men in the sector. This is probably due to the fact that they are underrepresented in those higher roles. We found that at the current rates of new hires, promotions, attrition, that the sector will not reach gender balance at the current trajectory. We found that although the number of women amongst new hires is higher than their share of the nuclear workforce, it's still not enough to reach gender balance. We also found that women are significantly underrepresented in the STEM hires, but both STEM and non-STEM hires, they are less than half, but they are less than a quarter in the STEM hires. We found that women are doing well in promotions compared to their representation in the workforce. They are promoted at slightly higher rates than their representation. But again, this has more to do with their success in those non-STEM promotions. And overall, given the low representation, even with those promotions, it's not going to result in significant change at the top of the management structure. We also found that with attrition rates, women, when they are exiting the workforce, the nuclear workforce, it tends to happen earlier. So when they're still in non-management or in those lower management positions. So again, in terms of creating a pool of women who would be eligible for successively senior roles, this is not a good trend. We asked women in our public opinion survey if they felt that their nuclear workplaces supported them. And we asked about a lot of different things. We asked about salaries, performance appraisals, career opportunities. We asked about sexual harassment in their workplaces. We asked about what they thought about management. We asked about hostile behaviors and attitudes, whether they felt valued. So we asked all sorts of different questions, trying to get at this key point about how they are supported. And what we found is that the women in our public opinion survey said that their nuclear workplace does not sufficiently support them. About half of them said that they felt that their salaries, performance appraisals, and career opportunities were not equal compared to those of their male colleagues. 41.7% said that women are not valued in their workplace. Less than half felt that their workplaces supported women. 44.7% reported first or secondhand accounts of sexual harassment. This is a very high rate. They expressed low confidence in the commitment of their managers to gender balance. They felt that their workplace culture was not supportive, and over half reported some hostile behaviors or attitudes towards women. And this effect was stronger for women who reported to be members of a minority group, who were working in STEM roles, or who were working in roles that required fewer educational credentials. We also found that nuclear-specific issues interact with broader social cultural challenges to limit women's contributions to the sector. One of the really strongest findings is that over 70% of women agreed that pregnancy and family responsibilities negatively impact their careers in the nuclear sector. We found overwhelmingly that women told us that they were experiencing stereotyping, microaggressions, unconscious bias about leadership characteristics being male, that they're working in male-dominated work cultures, that the jobs they need to do are not women-friendly if they want to get promoted, and overall a lack of female leaders, a lack of female role models and mentors, an overall lack of the visibility of women in the sector. So we can see that this is not wholly characteristic of the nuclear sector. This could also be broader issues related to women in society and to STEM sectors, but these two interactions create barriers for women's contributions to the sector. So what are we going to do about it? We've developed a policy framework based on 3 pillars: attracting women to the sector, retaining and supporting them, and advancing them, undergirded by data. Each of these pillars has a series of recommendations associated with it. I would encourage you to download the report to read more about our recommendations, and you will also be hearing a bit more from our keynote speaker, who is my pleasure to introduce next. We will be hearing now from Dr. Fiona Raymond, the Vice Chair of the Nuclear Energy Agency's Steering Committee, the Chair of our Gender Balance Task Group, and the Chief Science and Technology Officer of the United Kingdom's National Nuclear Laboratory. Dr. Raymond, it's my pleasure to give you the floor.
Thank you, Florence, and hello, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here today and to provide this keynote to you on International Women's Day. This whole area of gender balance is a really important topic. Improving diversity in the nuclear sector will enable better business. It will enable better productivity. It will enable better profitability. It will enable a better retention of the workforce, and it will drive better innovation, just to name a few of the reasons why this is so very important. And enabling gender balance is a key aspect to all of the above. We've heard from Florence through the Nuclear Energy Agency on the data, and some of it is really quite stark when you think about the fact that we are now in 2023 and these issues are still being seen today. The data speaks for itself, and the qualitative information that we have gleaned from a whole variety of people working in the nuclear sector internationally means that there are some things here that we absolutely must change. So what are we doing about it? We're hoping to create the policy framework that Florence just alluded to. And that policy framework will use the data to frame and track our progress against the 3 pillars within that strategic framework of attract, retain, and advance. Attracting women into the sector, working through how to retain and support women in the workforce, and understanding how to advance and develop women throughout their careers as leaders. This will be implemented in a national context. And the point of the framework is to enable a whole variety of countries to have a framework that they can then work on and understand how to implement this approach. These systematic challenges require a coordinated response and coordinated action. And there's a real opportunity here to leverage government influence on the nuclear sector, aligning priorities and mobilizing the resources accordingly. Now, in terms of who we're going to target, we're targeting government agencies, contractors, and funding recipients within the nuclear sector. And a whole variety, a broad range of organizations are being invited to engage with us and implement this framework going forward. And the way that we're going to do that is through international cooperation through the Nuclear Energy Agency. So in terms of that framework, I've highlighted that there are the 3 key pillars. The first one is about attracting women into the workforce. We'll do that through public communications, through showcasing women's leadership, through enhancing educational pipelines. That talent pipeline is leaky, and we need to make sure that we focus on that and focus at a whole variety of different stages in that pipeline. And we'll also look at gender balanced recruitment and hiring. In terms of retention, we want to focus on inclusive workplaces, addressing career impacts of family, eliminating harassment, and being aware of how to enable executive performance that's linked through gender balanced progress. At the end of the day, we all know that you get what you measure. And so linking it to performance, we believe, is a key way of achieving this. And then in terms of advancement, we want to eliminate unequal gender impacts. We want to train the decision makers to enable them to understand gender balance impacts and inclusivity within the workplace. We want to enable leadership training, resource and ally groups, and actually ensure that we have pay parity reviews, which we can all then learn from each other in terms of best practice. And the whole framework is underpinned by data. Through the public goal setting by nuclear agencies, contractors, and funding recipients, through having designate resources and senior level responsibility for that gender balance, and having regular qualitative and quantitative reporting on gender balance through the Nuclear Energy Agency. So what I'd like to talk about here is just the fact that we actually have a unique sector. And as a result of that, there's a real opportunity for change. Now, when I mean unique, I don't mean different. We are actually quite similar to lots of other sectors. However, the uniqueness is actually as follows. We have a major demographic shift which is underway in the global nuclear field. We have senior generations retiring, and many of which will retire actually within the next 5 to 10 years. A new talent is recruited in response to these new investments and replacing people who have left. Secondly, there's actually an opportunity to change long-standing gender imbalance and socio-cultural perceptions about the masculine stereotype of nuclear sciences. And we recognise that there's once in a generation chance to transform this within the nuclear field. Lastly, but by no means least, we actually have a small and clearly defined sector with a large number of government organisations. A large number of organisations are under government purview, either owned by the government or actually operating with the government because of the level of government funding that these organisations have. Extensive government funding of nuclear technology at all stages of the life cycle mean that there's an opportunity to leverage government influence and improve gender balance within the nuclear sciences. So that opportunity to change is here. And we have a real opportunity to take this information from the report and create a framework going forward that will enable member countries to actually drive forward a new era in nuclear that actually involves a much more balanced workforce, that is much more diverse of thought, that actually will enable far greater productivity in comparison to where we've ever been before. And as part of that, we will have a great gender balance going forward. So that's what I'd like to say today. I'm really, really pleased that this report is coming out now. And I'm really, really looking forward to working with the Nuclear Energy Agency and a number of my national and international colleagues within the nuclear field and outside of the nuclear field to drive forward with this policy instrument and enable us to make this change. It is a once in a generational opportunity. Thank you very much. And now what I'd like to do is move swiftly on to a fantastic panel that we actually have organised for you today. And if I can actually ask my panelists to actually put their cameras on, I am going to introduce my panelists to you all. And so we have with us, we have Malino Belenko, who's the Women in Nuclear Global Vice President and Deputy Manager of Internal Organizations at the National Atomic Energy Commission of the Republic of Argentina. Welcome, Malina. We have Yoni Ha, who is the Vice President for Global Activities at the Career Institute of Nuclear Safety, and who was formerly with the Nuclear Energy Agency. Welcome, Yoni. We have Lisa McBride, who is the Vice President, Country Leader at GE Hitachi SMR Canada, and President of Women in Nuclear Canada. Welcome, Lisa. And we have Aditi Verma, who is the Assistant Professor of the Department of Engineering and Radiological Sciences at the University of Michigan. Welcome, Aditi. And we have Neil Wilmshurst, who is the Senior Vice President of Energy System Resources at EPRI, the Electric Power Research Institute. Welcome, Neil. Okay, so we're going to get straight into the conversation. So my panelists have had the opportunity to read this report. They've had the opportunity to be briefed by members of the Nuclear Energy Agency in terms of some of the key aspects of this. And I have a very brief series of questions that I'm going to pose to them now. and just get their take on things. Maybe I'm going to start with Neil. It's really great, by the way, to have a gentleman in the room. We do want gender balance, and we know that this is a very important issue, and a lot of us women talk to each other about it, but we recognise the importance to have men on this journey as well, and we need to get to a balance of the same male and female kind of like levels in the workforce. So Neil, what were your biggest takeaways from the report's findings in your view?
Okay, well, thanks, Fiona. So I was reading the report yesterday as I was on a long flight, and I reflected back on my career journey, starting as a nuclear submariner in the Royal Navy, where if anyone had asked me 30, 40 years ago, would I have ever seen women in nuclear submarines, it would have been beyond my conception. And look, they're there now. So, you know, it brought home a little bit to me that, yeah, I've been the lucky one in my career, that bias that's there, I've benefited from. But I've also had a chance to see some of that change, the pendulum slowly swinging. And I think the observation looking at the data was that I need to, and my colleagues need to reflect on the difference between equality and equity. The data shows there's probably a good trend towards equality of opportunities. You see the promotion rates and things like that, but the equity issue still isn't addressed. And I think there's still some confusion out there amongst my kind of male colleagues about the difference between equality and equity.
Thanks, Neil. I think that's a really important point, and I'm sure it will come up as we move things forward. We need both, and we kind of like need to have the trajectory to both. And I'm completely with you that there's a lot of focus on equality right now, and we absolutely need to be thinking about the equity side as well. Can I move to Lisa and maybe get Lisa's view on this?
Sure. Thanks, Fiona. And thanks, Neil, for your comments. So I would just add a comma to what Neil said. I think, you know, if we think about the nuclear industry, right, there were a lot of female pioneers, Marie Curie, Harriet Brooks in Canada, in the nuclear industry, and we're not making the advancements that we need to. I think the biggest takeaway I had from the report really, though, was around the retention issues. I think we really need to focus our efforts, particularly in that area. We are losing women. We attract them, but then we lose them at a much faster rate, which is going to be a challenge in terms of the third pillar of the report, which is advancing women. So I think there were some key takeaways there. I think also one of the findings about the support for women or the lack of support, you know, in terms of impacts related to family obligations, pregnancy leave responsibilities. I think we still have a lot of work to do. I think we've seen some progress, but much more progress is needed.
Thanks, Lisa. And on that area of support, I think that's going to be a fundamental part of one of the strategic pillars going forward to ensure that we actually attract the right people and then retain them going forward. So absolutely, thank you for that. Melina, would you like to comment on your thoughts on the report?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Fiona. Thank you for this opportunity. And I can highlight one key added value, in my opinion, of this report, which is the consistency with the inclusive workplace culture and the new ways of inhabiting the nuclear sector, which this global effort promotes. So I think the strength of this approach is to set an example by implementing these inclusive practices in all processes. And this report gave priority to a methodology focused exactly on raising the own voices of women and on ensuring safe spaces for them or for us to openly report the situation and the real needs. So I think the NEA effort promoted an approach which move away from practices that reduce women's participation to mere objects of research or to a mere category of analysis. So I think based on this active involvement of women in each phase of the process, including the discussions within the task group, which is an interdisciplinary environment, we can confirm, for instance, that women have a will, they express that they want to progress in their careers. However, the professional development programs are not effective and advancement opportunities are unequal. So the issue is not related to the lack of interest. So women are eager to participate in professional development programs, but concrete mechanisms for these advancements are still not sufficient. So I think that is one of the key findings of the report and main takeaway. Thank you.
Thank you, Melina. And this whole area of inclusivity and having an inclusive workplace and taking that forward, I guess, you know, that's going to be applicable across multiple sectors, multiple industries. And it just so happens that maybe in nuclear we have a smaller sector, and it's something we can maybe offer up that framework that can also be used elsewhere once we manage to sort it for ourselves as well. Aditi, do you have any comments just in terms of your thoughts around key points from the report?
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Raymond. And I just want to say I really congratulate you and the task group and the NEA for putting together this report. You know, for so long, we've heard these accounts, many accounts, but they're often regarded as just anecdotal accounts of women who feel like they're not being treated equally in the workplace. And to have this data from across the NEA member countries, from 8,000 women who responded to this survey, I just think it's so powerful to have that. I think the one thing that I would like to add that really struck out to me as I was reading the report is that, you know, as an academic, at least in a STEM field, I and even my colleagues like to think that nuclear engineering workplaces are meritocracies and that merit and excellence is rewarded. And to me, at least, what the report shows is that it's not a meritocracy for everyone. In fact, for many women, these workplaces are very much not meritocracies. They're not equally treated. Their excellence, their skills, their talents are not always recognized and rewarded. And that's really what leaves them to leave the sector and to leave the field. And so, you know, that was just, it really just struck out to me. And then despite that, despite not being treated equally, many women would still recommend other women to join the nuclear sector, to join the nuclear workforce. And that was just so poignant. It just sort of signified to me how resilient these women really are across these different countries and across these different workforces. They recognize the importance, you know, the important role that our technologies and that the sector can play. And they want more women to join the workforce, despite the fact that they, at least in the past, have not experienced the meritocracy that they thought they would. And so all of that really, to me, just points to the need to work towards this, to work towards achieving gender balance really as quickly as we can. And once again, you know, I really applaud the task group and the NEA for taking such a huge step towards that very important and admirable goal.
Thank you for that, Aditi. And your point around meritocracy is not always rewarded is a very interesting one, especially when we're talking about a lot of STEM workforce. And mostly in STEM, you would expect that would be rewarded. But the point around the positivity about the place makes me think that, hey, we're saying, hey, this is a good place to work, and we're working on making it great. So I think that's probably where we want to get to in terms of taking things forward. So I'd welcome Yoni. Please join the panel, and I'd welcome your thoughts.
Thank you, Dr. Raymond. Actually, I have many insights from this report, but I would say the biggest takeaways from this report that we found we have so many gaps ahead of us. Gap between member countries and regions, and gap between senior managers and working level staff, and more importantly, gap between ambitious plan and actual implementation. As DG Megwood mentioned during his opening remarks, that this report was produced based on the first comprehensive survey carried out in nuclear sector with NEA member countries. I think data collection was extremely helpful to know about the current state of gender balance in the nuclear sector. I think we are very proud of the progress we made. And taking this opportunity, I would like to appreciate the tremendous effort made by the NEA Secretariat and member state to make it happen during the very limited time frame. Speaking about the gap, as we all know that many countries have made very important steps in increasing women in nuclear sector. Senior managers like CEOs and DGs and president level persons easily mention about the importance of gender balance. But in reality, for example, regarding the question about the expression of management commitment to gender balance, only 32% people answered yes. So, good communication is not about what you are saying, but about what people understand, right? In that sense, this report tells us exactly where we are and what areas needed to be improved. As Aditi pointed out, the good news is that a majority of women surveyed would encourage the other women to pursue a career in the sector. But also it has significant regional variation. Asian countries' women are just half of the Northern Europe countries' women who answered positive. Actually, I'm not surprised to see the gap, but it seems clear that we need improvement. In a sense that we reaffirm the importance of gender balance and encourage others to make further progress on this important topic, we commit to working together with the NEA member countries and international communities in nuclear sector to shape a more open, diverse, inclusive, and gender balanced future. Again, I welcome this report, and we look forward to learning from others to move forward. Thank you.
That's great, Yoni, and your point about the report being so critical in terms of actually defining where the gaps are and what now needs to happen in terms of moving things forward, I think is a very important one, because you need to have the data, first of all, before you can actually work out what you need to do about it. So I think it's definitely a good first step. Now, I've got a whole load of questions that I would like to ask, and I'd like to ask every single panel member every single question, but we don't have that much time. So my next plan is to ask a few questions and maybe just pose it to maybe 2 panel members. But I ask other panel members, if you want to chip in, let me know that you want to chip in, and obviously we'll get you heard. So the first question, and maybe what I'd like to do, maybe I could pose this to Melina and maybe to Aditi, if you're both happy for this. So the report highlighted a number of challenges. In your opinion, what's the biggest challenge to increasing the contributions of women to the sector, and what should we do about it? So maybe I'll go to Melina first, if you're happy to take that one.
Sure, thank you, Fiona. Well, in my opinion, the biggest challenge is achieving the commitment of top leadership. It is important to understand that gender mainstreaming is not a program, it's not a project, it's not an issue to be addressed only by the human resources department within an organization. So the commitment of top leadership is vital as this process involves, as you mentioned, a change, cultural change. And on this point, I would like to share a very brief reflections on this. One colleague made me think about useful analogies, and I'm very thankful for this to my colleague, while attending a session on safety culture, where this quote was highlighting that the only thing of real importance that leaders do is to create and manage culture. So at this point, we agreed on the fact that it is crucial to work for gender equality and diversity in the nuclear sector by following the same approach used to understand and to ensure safety culture within our sector. Because leaders, as said, create and manage culture. So spaces to raise awareness and permanent and compulsory training on gender equality addressed to decision makers is, in my opinion, fundamental, as well as accountability mechanisms. So, thank you.
That's great, thank you. And your point around this commitment from top leadership, I'm going to go to Aditi first of all, but I might go to Neil. And Neil is kind of there in terms of top leadership. And maybe I'll just maybe ask Neil just to comment on that in terms of your thoughts in terms of how we get that commitment at top leadership levels.
I'm very fortunate the organization I now work in, EPRI, we have got that commitment all the way down, and the organization really does live to that. But I can tell you, even though we have that commitment all the way from our board through our CEO down through my colleagues in the executive team and all the way through, we still aren't perfect. We've probably, maybe it's a 70-30 split, but we tend to focus not exclusively on gender equity. We work on the entire diversity, equity, inclusion equation and treat them all as a whole rather than going just focused on particular aspects. And I saw some data today that is a measure of encouragement, I think. We have an organization of 1,200 people. We have 37 different languages spoken at EPRI. Which is an amazing statistic, I thought when I heard it, which is a reflection of that buy-in from the top all the way from the board is bringing that diverse mix of people. But it's hard. You've got to live it every day. And one key thing that we do, which might be a takeaway, you're never going to have diverse hiring if you don't have diverse interview panels. You know, old white guys will hire old white guys.
Thank you, Neil. I like that one. Diverse hiring, diverse interview panels. It's hard. You have to live it every day. That's some good sound bites that we can take away. Aditi, can I get your comments, please?
Yes, thank you so much. You know, to me, what is most challenging is that this really is it's a systemic problem. You know, you can't just fix one thing and expect this problem of women not entering the field, not staying in the field to be solved. And historically, I think the focus really has been on attracting women to the field. And I really appreciate that this report actually highlights the importance of support and retention. And I think to that point, what is going to be challenging, at least from my perspective, in implementing this is that what that support and what that retention work looks like in different national, organizational, and cultural contexts, I think that's going to look quite different. And I would just love to hear more and learn more about what that implementation is going to look like. And so I think the NEA, with its broad membership of over 30, I think 34 countries, I think really has such a great opportunity here to, through these conversations with the representatives from different countries to explore and understand what that implementation is going to look like in different national contexts. And I think, just one thing I will add that is maybe a bit of an aside is that by making the field more inclusive and more welcoming for women, we're not just helping women, but we're actually helping everyone by making the field more welcoming. And so I think this really is something worth doing. So I'll just leave it there.
Thank you very much. And your point around being able to do this in different countries and that support required in different countries is going to be very different in terms of what's needed, and actually using a framework to enable that and the NEA to help with that, I think is a point well made. We'll need to think about how we take this forward. And this is only the first step in the dance. I think there's quite a long journey to go as yet. Okay, so I've got another question now, and I'm going to go this time to Lisa, and I'm going to go to Yoni, and maybe you can offer some views on this. And again, if anybody else wants to jump in, just let me know. So the report highlights a three-pronged approach. So we have a strategic framework around retaining women, first of all, attracting them into the sector, retaining them, and then looking at how to advance them going forward. Obviously, all underpinned with data in terms of how that is measured in terms of progress. So I'm really interested in your thoughts on the approach. And basically, the more important bit is about how do we actually ensure success? So maybe if I can go to Lisa first and then to Yoni.
Sure. So I think, this is the key thing, I think, is ensuring success. If I think about this industry and where we've been on our equity, diversity, and inclusion journey and advancing the role of women, we've been on this journey for a while, in some countries longer than others, but we're not moving the needle as fast as we need to be. We're not making as much progress as we need to be. So I think, on those three key areas, it is about focusing, critical mass of efforts in three pillars that are going to, as we said, attract, retain, and advance women. If I think about the previous questions about enhancing the contribution, I think we need to not overlook the fact that women already do make valuable contributions to this industry. And it's important and incumbent upon organizations to profile the critical role that women play, which helps advance and retain. If you can see it, you can be it. It's all about role models. I think, if I think about the contribution piece and profiling that, it's also about having voices like Neil and DG Magwood and allies. We need all voices. This can't be a conversation just for women. This is a conversation for everyone. And I think we need women to step up in a way that makes them comfortable, to not be afraid to celebrate and share their success, right? We don't often brag. We don't often pat ourselves on the back about how we've contributed. So, if I think about that, we already are making a key contribution. We have to work collaboratively and we have to measure our progress. And I think the measurement is important. And I think we need to be transparent about the metrics so that we can see the progress that we're making collectively, domestically in member countries, so that we know what's working and what's not working.
Thanks, Lisa. The whole point about transparency of the metrics, hopefully this report helps with that in terms of actually starting that journey. But I like the point of see it and you can be it. So yeah, it's another good soundbite from the discussions that we're having so far. Thank you. Yoni, I'd welcome your thoughts.
Well, thank you, Dr. Raymond. I think this approach is quite relevant to increase women's contribution to the sector, because it provides more comprehensive, coordinated, and practical and substantive action plans to be implemented through the whole career path cycle. Actually, Korea has the similar approach. The Korean government enacted the Act on Fostering and Supporting Women Scientists and Engineers in 2002 and has been implementing the policy goals every 5 years under this Act. Actually, this policy package is so-called From Classroom to Boardroom has provided 3 stage customized support programs: education stage, and earlier career stage, and career maintenance and development stage over the life cycle. This is quite similar concept what we have in the report. Assuming that each activities, whether either attract or retain or advance, are supported by the comprehensive and action-oriented strategies and programs, which are on the full cycle of planning, doing, and giving feedback. The best way to ensure the success of the program is to carry out data collection on a regular basis. With data collection, both through the human research survey or public opinion perception survey, we just call the qualitative survey or quantitative survey, we can see the real trend, how many women increase in each stage, and also identify the areas to be improved, and also what are barriers and challenges in each stage. But of course, data collection will only show whether the policy solutions and actions are successful or not, just looking back on the past. In order to look forward to make our approach a success, we need to anchor more target-oriented and action-driven, and also context-specific policy level commitment using our resources. Actually, without our leaders' tangible effort to improve the gender balance at this sector, I think it is hard to guarantee the success of the program. Thank you.
Thank you, Yoni. And you know, I mean, it's really, really encouraging to hear that in Korea, you have similar kind of platforms in place in terms of the strategic platforms that we talk about. But your point around making sure that we actually measure that success and look at where we're up to in the journey using data is really, really important. And I come back to the point that I made earlier, you get what you measure. And so you actually need to be able to measure where you're at any particular moment in time in order to show that you're actually moving in the right direction. So thank you for that. I'm going to pivot again. And I'm now going to go to Neil first and then to Lisa, if that's okay. And again, offering any panel members to highlight that they want to add if they would like to. But I'm going to talk about change. You know, both of you are leaders in various positions, and we know that change is difficult. And we need action and accountability from the leaders of nuclear organizations. So recognizing that change is difficult, there's a question about how do we ensure that accountability? How do we make that happen? So Neil, over to you.
Okay, so this is an interesting one, Fiona, and I'm reflecting back on the work you and I and others have done around innovation, and back to Bill Magwood's role when he was a regulator of the NRC. This is all around, in many ways, you've got to remember, this whole nuclear industry really is about getting these nuclear plants operating successfully. And you teed it up very well at the beginning, Fiona, about let's talk about what success looks about as opposed to just what we're going to do. And I've reflected back on how we got to where we've got to in the nuclear plant environment. And that was being driven to success in a tough environment and turning into a kind of command and control culture, which I think has driven it to be a very demanding, a very masculine, if you like, culture, and very, very tough, unforgiving expectations and accountability model. And I think that is probably the root of many of the observations in the report, that culture which we have created ourselves over the past decades, which has got us to the level of performance we're at today. But I think there has to be a kind of a re-baseline of expectations, that this normality, which we've all lived with for the last 20, 30 years, can't continue going forward. That the new generation coming with the industry won't be prepared to work 70, 80, 90 hours a week in that tough, demanding, unforgiving culture. So I think the accountability will come in combination with a resetting of what an appropriate work culture in nuclear operations will be. I think that has to be the first step, recognizing that the culture which we all grew up with can no longer be sustained going forward to attract people into the industry. And I think once we have that reckoning and that kind of course correction, the accountability will be a lot easier to come to.
Thanks, Neil. And the point around like resetting this work culture and kind of like thinking about what's appropriate for the future instead of, you know, what's appropriate for today or yesterday, I think is definitely something that's worth unpacking at some point, kind of like further down the line as well. Thank you for that. Lisa, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think Neil made some really great points. I think it is about creating a work environment where we can attract talent. You've often heard me say, probably Fiona, that we do really complex things in this industry, far more complex than getting an equal seat at the table for women. So to me, this is really about, you know, being committed to change and understanding what the change journey looks like. Yes, it is hard, but we do harder things than this literally every day in this industry. I think it still comes back to being transparent and accountable. If I think from an organization perspective, it's also really about ensuring that you are connected to what is happening in your organization from C-suite to shop floor and every workspace in between. Often it's, you know, it's easy to look kind of just beyond the corners of your desk to see what's happening and everything looks good, but we really have to do a deep dive into the workforce to make sure that change is happening, and where it's not, figure out why, check and adjust. So I'm hoping that we're going to see a lot of transparency, and I think we need to share our experiences in this industry. You know, in Canada, our industry is really built on research and development. So we have a very collaborative approach in this industry. And I think, you know, we try to do a good job of sharing the things that are working and the things that are not working. And I think that is something as a collective industry we need to get a lot better at as it relates to this particular challenge.
I think that's quite right. And I like the way that you've actually brought out the employer role and the employee role in terms of that discussion, because you've said transparency and accountability, and there's an employer role in terms of actually making sure that happens. But there's also about being connected, and that's an employee role. That's about you as an individual and actually making sure that you're connected at all kind of like points of the, you know, the organization that you work with and the sector that you work with. It's about your networks and everything else too. So yeah, I think that's a very important thing to bring out. Okay, so I'm going to ask another question now, which is I guess what I'm going to offer this out now to Melina, to Aditi, and to Yoni. So the question is that we need to work together as a sector. How do we ensure that change is occurring holistically at the level of organizations, nationally and internationally? And you don't all need to kind of like do each individual answer, but maybe if each of you can at least comment on one of them. So maybe one can comment on organizationally. Maybe Aditi, maybe you could comment on organizationally. Maybe I could ask Melina to comment on nationally, and maybe Yoni, maybe you could comment on internationally. But feel free to offer whatever answer you want. It's just a thought in terms of how we kind of spice it up a bit. But Melina, would you like to go first?
Yes, sure, Fiona. So I think it is very important to reach an agreement on the relevance of addressing this issue at all levels and from a global approach. And the strategic framework promoted by this report is very useful as a collaboration platform for that purpose. And this first global effort led by Yoni is very relevant, I think, to ensure that this change happens in a holistic way, especially considering its multiplier effect. And this I can link both to the regional and national approaches. First, a concrete example of my region, Latin America and the Caribbean. As you may know, only 2 countries of Latin America and the Caribbean are member states of the NEA. A global effort by the NEA, considering that only 2 countries of Latin America and the Caribbean are member states of the NEA. This global initiative was one of the main driving forces to promote a complementary effort in our region, which is the first document, reference document on gender mainstreaming in the region, developed with the support of the ARCAL cooperation agreement and also the support of the IAEA. And I'm convinced that this multiplier effect will continue and consolidate the scope of this global effort. I am sure about that based also on previous positive experience in my country. The contribution and support of the institution were fundamental to gather data, as well as the role of the national chapter of Women in Nuclear in Argentina, WIN Argentina, which was responsible for coordinating the data collection among the institutions of the nuclear sector at the national level. And we noticed that as women are aware and recognize more and more this urgent need for a change, women's networks within institutions have been committed to ensuring the success of this initiative. So the promotion of these women networks, which involve safe support and containment spaces to share strategies and to strengthen their actions, is key. And as you know, these bottom-up initiatives have historically been key components of the women's movement at global level. So I think that strengthening their networks and acting through them has been crucial to promote women's agencies, and in particular to ensure and monitor that the policy instruments respond to the real needs.
That's great. Thank you very much. I'm going to kind of pass the floor over to Aditi and then to Yoni to get their thoughts on this as well. Aditi, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I think for this change to occur organizationally, I think the 2 things that come immediately to mind are data, and the second thing is culture. I know the point about data has been made by several people already. I think we need to repeat this exercise, not just at a national level, but also just to understand what's happening in each of our organizations. Who are we recruiting? Who are we promoting? Who are we retaining? Who are we losing? You know, is there pay equality? I think there's data that can be collected at an organizational level to hold us accountable and to make sure that this change happens. But the second thing that I like to add is, you know, Neil's comments in particular about culture made me think about the great success that we've had as a sector in implementing safety culture. And, you know, as we try to change our work culture and make it more inclusive, I think perhaps there are some lessons to be learned in terms of how successful we were in developing and implementing a safety culture. And so, yeah, I think that there's a lot that we can do as a sector, but also organizationally to develop a more inclusive culture for not just for women, but really for everybody.
Thank you, Aditi. And I'm going to move to Yoni. Maybe we can get a kind of a brief response from you too, and then we'll kind of like go into a final question, which is we've got a star coming into the show for that. So over to you, Yoni, in terms of
okay, I'll try to be very brief. Of course, we need all orchestration to change the world. Melina and Aditi they mentioned a lot about things. So just whether we are talking about at the organizational level and national level and international level, first we should be motivated to follow the global trend to enhance gender equality in the nuclear sector. I think that's very important part. And of course, at the national level, our contribution and commitment should be acknowledged or supported by the policy and national strategies. Speaking about the international level, we need a practical platform like the NEA to align priorities and spur coordinated efforts to make sure that we don't need to reinvent the wheel. And we are going to the same direction, no matter where you are, toward more diverse, fairer, more inclusive, and more gender-balanced society. Thank you.
Thank you, Yoni. And now what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to invite a student to come and sit beside me. As I've already said, today is International Mentoring Workshop for Girls in STEM here in the UK. If you want to come and sit here, I'm just going to come on over. You can see yourself on the screen here. I'll move over a little bit and you can get yourself in. So I'm just going to basically introduce you all to Ellie Haywood, who actually turned 18 yesterday. And Ellie is with Landau Forte College, Derby. I said that right? You're studying business, maths, and physics A level. And basically, I should probably just say that Derby schools are potentially feeders for places like Rolls-Royce here in the UK, who are of course developing SMRs. So she's got a question that she'd actually like to ask the panel. So over to you.
So I've got two questions. The first one is, what is your vision for the nuclear sector?
So, okay, your vision for the nuclear sector. So I'm just going to go round the room. So Neil.
I've noticed a trend here, Fiona. I'm always first. Okay, the vision for the nuclear sector. It's going to be different to where we are now. At the moment, we value conservatism, we value changing slowly, we value the old technology we've worked with. Going forward, we're going to be leaning forward, we're going to be innovative, we're going to be embracing new technology, and we're going to be, I'd say, fast followers with deployment of new technology, as opposed to where we are now, which is slow followers of new technology.
Thank you, Neil. On to Lisa.
Hi, Ellie. I think I would say my vision is a couple of things. First, I hope 10 years from now, we are not talking about this very issue. My vision is that we would have solved this challenge, and that, we are an innovative industry. We have a lot to offer. And so I think we want to foster, nurture, grow that innovation so that we can really, help the energy transition, help climate change, medical industry, all the great things that we do in this industry.
Thanks, Lisa. Melina?
Yes, I'm completely aligned with the colleagues, and I think that being part of the nuclear sector is unique, has always been unique, as science and technology have always had the power to change trajectories and are increasingly influencing all aspects of daily life. So I think this is more a motivational message, but working in the nuclear field is an opportunity for taking an active part in this change and for acquiring tools for their own advancement. So that would be my vision.
Thank you, Melina. Aditi?
Thank you. I think my vision is that the sector is inclusive, it's creative, it's forward-looking, and the many ambitions that we have now in terms of contributing to some of the greatest challenges that we face, climate change, energy access. I think my vision is that, if we look 10 years from now, maybe 20 years from now, we've actually made significant contributions towards solving those challenges and delivered on our promises and our technological ambitions, while making this a sector that's really welcoming to the people who come to it, to the people who join it.
Thank you, Aditi. And Yoni?
Well, we live in a world where we are facing tremendous challenges to achieve net zero carbon emission by mid-century, right? Nuclear sector has the opportunity to play a vital role in supporting this objective. So as long as nuclear is used in a peaceful purpose, it's awesome, and we are really changing the world. So we're speaking about quality of life without the secure and safe use of electricity, then we cannot talk about the quality of our future and bright life. That means nuclear will be bright. And as a regulator, as is the person who are working on the safety side, the nuclear sector is, as long as it is used in a safely, is fabulous, the energy source. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you for that. Now we've got a second question, which we'll pose to the ladies. So go ahead.
So why should I, as a young woman, be excited about a career in the nuclear energy industry or sector?
And maybe I'll pose to the ladies first of all, because Neil said he's always going first. I'll leave it to Neil at the end again, and we'll come back and get his view. So we'll go around the table the other way. And quick fire. So why should Ellie be excited? Yoni.
Well, like I said, since you can contribute to the value of the society, if you are working at the nuclear sector, you will significantly contribute to the society. So there is no limit to what we can accomplish if we will work together. So just think about your bright future. Join us. You can change the world. Why not? Who else?
Thank you, Yoni. Aditi?
I would say if you want to contribute to some of the biggest problems and challenges that our society and our planet faces today, and you want to work on something that's intellectually stimulating, I think those are good reasons to join the nuclear sector.
Thank you, Aditi. Melina?
I would say that as a woman working in the nuclear sector, you're able to become a member of solid networks like Women in Nuclear. And this is the ideal environment to enjoy all the opportunities for both professional and personal growth, which being part of a collective leadership can provide.
That's great. Thank you, Melina. And Lisa?
Yes, I would say, Ellie, there is lots of opportunity in this industry to have an exciting and diverse career. And while we've spent the last hour talking about the progress that we need to make, I would want you to know that there is significant movement afoot and that we are really working as an industry to make sure that women are set up to succeed. So you would have support.
Thank you, Lisa. And Neil?
Because we're all nice people. No, the answer is, if we all reflect, why did we join the nuclear industry? It's because it's so technically challenging and so rewarding. It's really, really great technology. It is hard, we all work hard, but it's really so fulfilling to do it. And the challenges going forward, one thing I've learned is the diversity of people in the room solving challenges makes the solutions way more effective. You should join the nuclear industry because we need you in the nuclear industry to bring a different perspective to the conversations.
Thank you, panel. Ellie,
thank you very much.
You've heard it here. You've heard why you should join. I don't know if you can see this, but there's around 300 people on this call at the moment. So you're talking to the world. There's people in Kenya, the US, Argentina. It just goes on and on and on. The world is watching you and you're here online. I didn't tell you at the start, but now you know. Anyway, thank you for joining us. Just stay here a minute. I'm just going to introduce the next keynote. So the closing keynote, I would like to introduce to all of you, Alicia Duncan. And Alicia is a Deputy Assistant Secretary for the International Nuclear Energy Policy and Cooperation Department within the US Department of Energy. Alicia, the floor is yours.
Fiona, thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to share a few reflections on this very important International Women's Day. First, let me wish all of you all on screen watching us all around the world, a happy International Women's Day. This is an important time in history for many reasons. And the gender question and challenge is more important than ever, as we are now faced with not only meeting climate objectives, but also trying to shore up energy security. I am so grateful of the work that has been done by the group that has been brought together under the auspices and coordination of the Nuclear Energy Agency. We had a very diverse group and got a lot of feedback from the surveys, both the human resource piece of it and the personal experiences piece of that. And one of the interesting things with the many meetings that we had, and these were 4-hour discussions, so there were many hours of time put into this, is that while there are gaps, there are many, many things that unite us as women working in the nuclear sector. There are many similar challenges that we share. There are many experiences that we've had. And one of the beauty of this is that we were able to walk this journey together in our diversity, but with our shared challenges. I'm so grateful for the leadership of DG Magwood, who has been a constant champion of gender balance, dating back longer than Ellie has been on this earth, longer than my career in federal service, which is past 32 years, because he knew it was the right thing to do. I'm equally as grateful for the organization of the NEA Secretariat, who Florence and Ursula and Greg and others have really organized our thoughts. Can you imagine organizing and synthesizing information for more than 8,000 people in a number of countries that participated in the survey? And there was so much data that I had no idea how we would ever get to the point where we were able to do a report. And here we have this day, a report posted, which in a way represents accomplishment, but also just one milestone of a continued long journey for us to go. Dr. Raymond's leadership of this initiative and the UK specifically with all of the experience they have had. My friend Lisa from Canada and her Win Canada experience and what they have done, and the many other countries that joined us, to include Italy, Romania, and so many others, Argentina, that were able to share their thoughts with us. To partner in that way on such an important issue was just incredible. And so I want to encourage those who are on the screen, regardless of where you are in your journey, that we have the report and its findings, but that should only be part of our guiding next steps. We have to remember on this day, International Women's Day, that one of the things that really supports gender balance are women ourselves. The way we support one another is critically important. I was so heartened to see that Ellie was on the screen, a young person thinking about making her way, because one thing that I don't think we do enough of is have women support other women. I'm very pleased that, I mentioned the names of Fiona and Lisa and others that and Yanni, let me not forget about Yanni Ha, that we've worked in an industry in very different capacities, but we're able to call on each other to make sure that if we need another person, a smart person on the panel, not just a woman, a smart person, professional on the panel, that we can call on our friends and that we can call on each other and that we can leverage our synergies because it's important. And I also want to equally highlight the importance of having allies. Throughout all of those meetings that I mentioned, we had many male supports from Japan, Argentina, and I won't name all the countries because I won't get them all right. And of course, DG Magwood, Greg Lamar from the NEA. So I just, I want to just make a very, very important appeal that women support women, that men know that we need and appreciate your support, and that we all recognize that we each have a responsibility in this fight. Our responsibility is to call out gender inequity. Each time I'm in a room and there's not a near enough representation of women in the room, I bring it to those in the room's attention. Each time that I speak before CEOs in an international fora, I bring it to the attention, the importance of gender balance. I don't care what they ask me to speak on. I'm going to make sure people know how important it is that gender balance be part of the thought process behind our progress in nuclear deployment as we work towards quickly and urgently, as many of the panelists pointed out, trying to deploy nuclear all over the world. And therefore, I continue to challenge you not only to work together, but be an advocate for the cause and be an advocate for yourself. You must be bold, you must be brave, and you must continue to act cooperatively and collaboratively so that we can work together to continue to make progress in this challenge. And I will close with, again, my thanks to all at the NEA, my thanks to my fellow colleagues that served on and continue to work on this important effort for the NEA member countries, as well as all of you who joined us today for this program. We have a lot of work to do, and we have the right people engaged in doing it. They are our young people, they are our allies, they are the women who have blazed paths for us. So my ask to you is to continue to be bold, to move with urgency, and to work together. Thank you. And with that, I will turn it over to my mentor, my friend, and the man who has led this led and championed the cause, DG Magwood.
Thank you very much. And I feel like I should not say anything because Ms. Duncan said everything that could possibly be important to say. It's always a pleasure to listen to her, give her thoughts on these important issues. And thank you, Alicia, for your comments. Let me also thank the panel. It's a fantastic panel. Melina Blanco, a great partner with Win Global. Thank you for being here. Vice President Yani Ha, who probably had to stay up later than everyone else to be on the call because she's calling from Korea. Lisa McBride, and I think Dr. Raymond mentioned this. Lisa McBride was very instrumental in helping us set the framework for the surveys that enable us to collect this data. So Lisa, thank you for being here. And always a pleasure to listen to Professor Verma. She always has very sharp insights and a lot of passion for this subject as well as many others. And also, because we kept talking about Neil first, I'll talk about Neil last. Neil Wilmhurst. The biggest problem with Neil is there's only one of him. We have to clone Neil and use him all around the world. Neil, thank you for being here. And finally, Professor Raymond, who's just been such a fantastic partner in all this. As Ms. Duncan said, there's a lot of work you have to do. The release of this report is really the beginning, is not the end. Countries have to work with us to implement this, and we're looking at different mechanisms to make that happen. So we'll be working hard on that. So the intellectual part of this is out there. Now it's time for the policy making. And so we're going to be working very diligently to do that. So we're a little over time, so I'll conclude, but let me just say one last thing. The data we collected was very important, and it helped us put this framework together. And the discussions that you heard about the policy framework, also very important. Let me also thank Florence Marr, who worked tirelessly to put all this information together. So Florence, thank you for your efforts. But let me just say that to me, the biggest education wasn't really from the data, although I was surprised by various things. It was what I learned along the way. And as we went through this exercise and we talked to women from around the world, and we heard stories about women in the nuclear sector who had to put up with really unconscionable remarks being made about them by male colleagues in the workplace, which wasn't something I heard once, but heard many, many times throughout this process. When I saw from one of our member countries in Europe that the pay differential for the exact same work was 40% different between men and women. How does that happen in the modern world? So I learned things that I didn't know. I heard things that, quite frankly, I found shocking and embarrassing and would not have known if we had not gone through this exercise. And when I hear these stories that women have told us, how some of them, and I can tell when they talk about this, things that may have happened years ago still leave scars that they still feel and still reflect. I see Ellie, who just turned 18, who might be in the nuclear sector in the future. She should never have to go through any of that. And I think that all of us here today who are listening should commit ourselves and make sure that when Ellie is working at a nuclear facility, 5 or 10 years from now, that she doesn't have to put up with these remarks and the harassment, that she doesn't have to worry about being paid less because she's female. We should commit ourselves to that. And I personally believe that we can get there. So with that, I think we will bring this to a close. And I thank all of you for listening today. Please look at the report. And if you have some thoughts and suggestions, don't hesitate to get them to us. Thank you for being here. Thank you to all the speakers, and happy International Women's Day.
The NEA report on gender balance in the nuclear sector is now available for download on the NEA website. You can access it directly on the link displayed on screen. You can also follow the NEA on Twitter and LinkedIn to keep in touch with us and receive updates on our programs and events like this one. For details of other OECD activities during the month of March, search for #OECD Gender. Thank you and good afternoon.